Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suisuiki. Coming up.
Any scheme where somebody can work all week and not get paid for it is clearly a scheme that has exploitation.
RSC workers take their ex-boss to court. Also,
I've been enjoying it so far. The acts and people are friendly. Very, very nice festival there.
A Ni-Vanuatu musician makes his international debut at WOMAD Festival in Aotearoa, and some mixed results for Pacific sports teams. Recognised seasonal workers in New Zealand have taken their former employer to court after wage deductions for some weeks reduced their wages to zero. The New Zealand Herald says court documents show money was taken out for insurance, wet weather gear, storage and missing kitchen equipment from their hostel. The case, which is currently before the Employment Court, dates back to 2020 and involves 3 Solomon Islands workers who joined the REC scheme under Pick Hawke's Bay Incorporated. Acting Council of Trade Union President Rachel McIntosh told Caleb Fotheringham the workers had been subjected to flagrant breaches of their minimum entitlements.
We know that the RSE scheme is one where exploitation does happen because people are so vulnerable and often they lack the resources to go to court. They're locked into employment by their visas. They generally don't have unions, often don't speak English, and they're completely open to having their legal entitlements trampled by employers who just count on them not being able to raise any issues.
This specific issue seems to be largely around costs from travel, insurance, weather gear coming out of their pay slip. Is this idea of deducting money from these RSE workers for those type of expenses quite common?
It does happen, but it's outrageous and it's against the agreements to recruit that the employers have signed. And in the case of wet weather gear, that's against the health and safety legislation in New Zealand where employers are required to provide that kind of gear.
Do the workers get told beforehand that this is going to be part of the costs?
I actually can't answer that question, but no, they can't be because the employers have agreed that they won't be. The employers have said that they'll act within the law, and then they're doing this anyway. Any scheme where somebody can work all week and not get paid for it is clearly a scheme that has exploitation at its core.
I guess I understand that there is some charges that people sign up to, and is there a line there that the workers can take this out of their paycheck but can't take this? I'm just wondering what that line is.
Yes, there are. For example, if it is an expense that the worker would otherwise have had as kind of a normal part of their life, then that can be deducted. But with their agreement and with that worked out in advance so that the worker knows how much money they're going to have deducted. But several of these deductions were unlawful. They weren't allowed under the agreements to recruit, and that's an agreement that the employers signed with Immigration New Zealand. Any proposed deductions have to be submitted to Immigration New Zealand before being put into effect, and that clearly hasn't happened.
Do you think that this case will have wider implications for the RSE scheme?
Potentially, it could have wider implications because so many workers are in this same situation who are on the RSE scheme. You know, as I said before, often English is a second language, don't have the resources to challenge and don't have easy access to unionisation. And so it could have an effect. And it's not that an RSE scheme is impossible. It just needs to be managed very carefully to avoid exploitation.
Up-and-coming Ni-Vanuatu artist Tio says performing at the World of Music, Arts and Dance Festival in New Zealand over the weekend was an experience of a lifetime. The singer-songwriter from Ambrym in Vanuatu draws inspiration from daily life in his volcanic island home, asking listeners to rethink their relationship with nature. Koroi Hawkins caught up with Tio at WOMAD.
My music is just some music. I don't really know which name I would give, but it's my creation, what I kind of feel it, and yeah, my creation, yes.
how do you feel about being here at WOMAD New Zealand this year?
It's my first time at WOMAD New Zealand, and it's a big thing for me. It's very, very a big thing. So I kind of looking forward for my gig now, soon. And I've been enjoying it so far. The acts and people are friendly. Very, very nice festival. Yeah.
What would your advice be for artists in the islands? We have a lot of musicians, playing locally, playing regionally, but to make it to an international festival like this, what might be your advice to other musicians in the Pacific?
I'm thinking my advice is to, if you're like a musician or an artist, I guess you have to keep doing what you're doing and create more of what you're doing. Yeah, your own feeling, and not copying people or wanting to be someone else. You do what you feel, you, and in you.
Bislama ini small talk for people of Vanuatu, New Zealand. Might no garam chance for come looking you. All people of Malaysia, all people of Pacific. I think you know one island artist. This is a big fall festival.
Oh yes, everyone big opportunity. Also, thank you, Thomas. Lo, can I support everyone? We live support the music life. Lo Vanuatu. O lo Lailan bimi olbot kam kasem naya mi one lo musician we make a walk out there through lo one big opportunity we come out somehow no more through lo belief lo music we Mr. Nalem. I guess Mande talem thank you gamli everyone all fans everyone we start enjoying my music lo life. Yes.
Thank you, Thomas.
Captain Charles Moore discovered the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in 1997, and he has spent much of his life revealing how pervasive plastic is in our oceans. His search for plastic has since broadened, and he has found it in things like honey, salt, compost, and even in placenta and breast milk. His focus now is on measuring the amount of microplastics in drinking water in his home state of California. Captain Moore spoke to RNZ's 9 to Noon presenter, Catherine Ryan.
This is the age of plastic. I think it's not realized by the average person that plastic is dominating the age in which we live, and that its consequences, while beneficial to a large degree, have a downside. And that downside is increasing as the plastics that are discarded break into micro and nano-sized particles. And those micro and nano-sized particles now are contaminating the entire biosphere. And my message is that we need to realize that discards turn into tiny little pieces that are basically clogging everything up and causing problems for wildlife, for birds, and even now for plant life.
How so for plant life?
Well, the nanoscale particles that are often used to create compost. You shake the compost to get it to go through screens, and then these plastic films that have been used in agriculture to cover the fields break into these tiny pieces. And those tiny pieces then accumulate around the root zone of plants, and some studies have shown that plants are able to take up these nanoscale particles into the leaves of the plant. So we've been concerned for a long time about eating plastic, drinking water that has plastic in it, seeing it in our salt or honey, even now finding it in umbilical cord blood. But that's another level of concern when we see these nanoscale particles accumulating in our vegetables. That's another level.
You mentioned the umbilical cord. Basically, probably most of us have consumed and have microplastics, and including the very, very youngest of us, yes?
Yes, that unfortunate fact is that the age of plastic has resulted in the age of plastic pollution. And that is underreported because it simply doesn't elevate to the scale of climate change. But that's changing. My role is to create elevation of this issue to the level that we now experience in the catastrophic results of carbon pollution. Really, plastic is simply the solid form of petroleum. When we talk about the excesses from our petroleum consumption, we fail to recognize that if we simply add some catalyzing agents, petroleum becomes plastic. And that material now is becoming more and more common as we shift away from petroleum as fuel to petroleum as plastic.
What do we know as yet is the impact of microplastics found in bird life, in fish life, now in vegetable life, and indeed in human life, right at the start of life?
Well, as physiologists, you can't really dose humans with these things and find out what's happening to them. You have to wait till it happens. But we are seeing the results of dosing experiments in fish and birds. Birds actually have become smaller and sicker because of their tendency to, especially seabirds, to feed on plastics floating on the surface of the ocean. And there's a diagnosis now been given for it, plasticosis. And that plasticosis is a result of these bits of plastic impacting their intestinal structure and causing tearing of their intestines. And it also lowers the amount of nutrition they get. When you're mistaking, imagine going to the supermarket and having to have half of the produce be plastic, and you're consuming it, and it's displacing the nutrition you'd get from a normal meal. That's the kind of thing that happens with birds. Now in fish, there's even a more sinister aspect, and that is passing the blood-brain barrier. These nanoscale particles are able to pass through the blood-brain barrier of the fish when they're given them to consume in laboratory experiments. And in laboratory experiments, the fish then go through changes, behavioral changes. They don't swim as far looking for food, and they don't spend as much time looking for food. In other words, the brain has been affected. And I know that there's a current problem with memory loss, that Alzheimer's is on the rise. And I just worry because plastic is an insulator. That's how we cover our wires so they don't short out. Well, we don't want our brains not firing synapses and not having this electrical connectivity that makes our brains function. And by clogging up the brain with a bunch of nano-sized particles, you create a situation in which the normal functioning of the electrical connections in the brain is disrupted.
There are mixed results for the Pacific teams of the Super Rugby Pacific franchise. Our senior sports journalist, Eliesa Tora, joins me for a Pacific Sports Talanoa to talk about the winners and the teams that took an L.
Bola Eliesa, the Fijiana Drua started their defence of the Super W title in Brisbane last Saturday. How did they go?
Yes, the Fijiana Drua kicked off their defence of the Super W Championship title with a good 32-21 win over the Reds in Brisbane on Sunday afternoon. They played very well after the first quarter, because in the first quarter the two teams were battling each other, I think, sizing each other up and trying to see how best they could outdo each other. But the Fijiana Drua had led 10-7 at halftime, and in the second half managed to put together enough to claim the win against the Reds. Karlaini Naisewa, their captain, said that their offloading game, which was part of their game plan, was something that helped them, and they constantly threatened the Reds line throughout the game with that, with offloading in tackles and just making sure that they kept moving forward. Coach Moses Rauluni told the media after the win that he was happy with what he saw, but added also that there were more opportunities they could have used, could have turned for their benefit, but was happy with the win. So the Fijian and Drua beating the Reds in Ballymore on Sunday afternoon, 32-21 to kickstart their season.
Moana Pasifika and the Fijian Drua were also in action over the weekend. What were the results and how did the teams perform?
Moana Pasifika, had a tough match also against the Western Force in Perth on late Friday night, early Saturday morning for us here in New Zealand. But they managed to pull through in the end, winning 22-14, and gave head coach Fa'alongo Tana Umanga a good birthday present, as enjoying his 50th game as a coach in the Super Rugby competition. They led 12-7 at halftime, and in the end, they had proven stronger for Western Force. Moana Huka Sama Malolo and veteran Sekope Kepu also, adding to the scoreline for Moana. The Fijian Drua, unfortunately, had a tougher game against the Chiefs in Hamilton. The Chiefs, of course, showing their strength and coming out 41-29 winners in the end. The Drua would be ruining the chances that they miss. During the game, their forward pack had put together some exciting moves, went towards the Chiefs line, but, bad decisions and basic mistakes, knock-ons, cost those opportunities to go begging. The Drua will now have to work harder in trying to beat the Wartas at home in Lautoka this weekend. So Moana adding another win to their record this year, second win for 2024. The Drua, unfortunately, losing to the Chiefs on Saturday night.
The OFC Women's Club Championship final rounds of matches were held in Honiara. The semi-finalists are confirmed. How is that shaping up?
Yes, interesting matches in the OFC Women's Club Championship in Honiara at the weekend on Friday and Saturday. Fiji's Lambasa will now face Papua New Guinea champions Hekari United on Wednesday in one of the semi-finals, and the other will feature Auckland United, of course, from New Zealand, and Vanuatu Stafea. Lambasa, just needed a draw, and they did that. They ousted New Caledonia's Academy Feminine, the defending champions. They held them to a 0-0 draw on Saturday, and Auckland United pipped Tonga's Veitongo 1-0 to qualify for the semi-finals. On Friday, early on Friday, Hekari United from Papua New Guinea thrashed Avatiu from Cook Islands 5-0 to qualify for the semi-finals. And Vanuatu Stafea pushed out Henderson Eel, Solomon Islands Hopes in a 3-0 win on Friday also. So Stafea earning their way into the interesting matches, and it'll be also interesting to see how these four teams go in the semi-finals on Wednesday.
And just to finish off with our Talanoa, do we have any other sport updates from around the region?
Adverse weather conditions in Fiji at the weekend on Saturday, but the Kaiviti Silk Tails playing against the South Sydney Rabbitohs in Rugby League went down 2014. Coach Waisnengama saying that he was happy with how the team performed, but the scoreline didn't go for them. In Fiji Rugby, despite the adverse weather conditions recorded over Fiji in the weekend, Fiji Rugby Union Super Cup competition continued, and Suva, the capital city team, continuing with their winning run so far, beating Madhuata 34-16 in another exciting game for them. Old rugby champions Nandronga also proving too strong for newcomers Mba, 22-16. And, there were women and under-20 matches as well. In the women competition, the Suva women's team in the Marama Cup defeated Nasino 31-14 in another exciting game. And in the under-20s, one of the biggest scores came in the women's competition, where Tailevu Tres Esawa 59-12. Those are some of the results at hand from competitions held in the region at the weekend.
That's Pacific Waves for today. To listen back, head over to rnzi.com/programs. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, Tō Whāsui Fua.